Trailblazers. So recently, Prydwen updated their tier list yet again with the new addition of Sparkle to the game. They bumped up a few characters' rankings and we're now looking at it. Straight away, I would like to say that Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae is not an S plus tier unit. He simply isn't. I repeat, Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae isn't an S plus tier unit, and that is Prydwen's first and probably most fatal mistake, as we'll see going down the list. He simply isn't. He is at least S plus tier as a unit. I understand not wanting to do S because then at that point that just sounds a bit too extra and a bit too cringe, but I think he's at least S plus tier, and let me explain why. First of all, he doesn't care about the type of content. Single target, AoE, it doesn't matter. As long as he has skill points, which Sparkle will provide him plenty of, he will demolish any content, imaginary, weak, or not. Additionally, he has a lot of free crit damage stats from his traces, which makes him super easy to build. I feel like if you're a new player, picking up a Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae will do wonders for your account because of how easy he is to build and play. His main selling point is doing damage, and with Sparkle, he will do a lot of damage because now we're just going to assume that everyone that pulls Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae will have pulled the other 5-star limited unit, Sparkle. So, if that is the case, then surely you will never run out of skill points because we're going to consider them being together at all times. But I get it. What this tier list is trying to say is that in his best team, Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae is S plus tier, probably the best DPS in the game right now, which I agree, but I feel like it is at least an S plus tier. He is just that good. On top of that, he's just so good looking and handsome and awesome. The way that he just dashes around in the overworld as well is so cool, and is really probably the fastest way to move around the Star Rail map. And if you take that into account, he is amazing for speedrun players, which puts him in at least S++ tier. Moving on to Jingliu, I think she's a very strong unit, and I think at least S++ tier as well. I feel like she has stayed stagnant in S+ tier for too long. Even with all of these broken, busted new characters being added to the game, she at least deserves S++ tier. First of all, she is so easy to build, which is an amazing plus. And on top of that, she freezes all the enemies, so you don't have to bring a sustain as much into fights. The sooner you end it, and the less the enemies move, the less you need sustain. So you can swap out maybe your sustain for even more offensive power, and that's just her talent. Jingliu's Enhanced E does amazing AoE damage and amazing single target damage as well. And so I did my research, and apparently she's very good because she consumes less skill points than other main DPSs like Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae, making her a great use of Bronya as her best support. That's why I think that she deserves at least S++ tier. Also, being the Ice weakness gives her access to Ice Weakness Break, which is one of the strongest weakness breaks in the game for DOT characters as well, because when the enemy is frozen, after they take their turn, they have a shorter time needed until they take their turn again, which is amazing for DOTs because that means your DOT will trigger more frequently in that time, making her amazing to pair with DOT characters, just like the S tier specialist Kafka. But we'll get into her later. Let's just move through the list one by one for now. Moving on, we have Doctor Ratio in S tier, which I think is a bit absurd. I can maybe understand it if you don't consider the fact that he is a completely free-to-play unit. Building him and playing him is literally a DPS upgrade over other characters. And yes, you might say that if you look at the raw numbers, his numbers aren't the biggest compared to Jingliu and Imbibitor Lunae, especially in AoE situations. And to that, I will say I agree. However, you misunderstand. The DPS increase he gives is the DPS increase that having more Stellar Jade will give. For example, the person who owns the E0 Doctor Ratio probably has Jade to spend on an S1 Lyco now. therefore making Doctor Ratio much cheaper and consequently generally much stronger because you require less investment in him to use. So, with that in mind, I still agree that he is weaker than Jingliu and Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae due to his lack of AoE damage. However, he is at least S+ tier. Jing Yuan, on the other hand, our general, finally is getting the recognition he deserves. I have been a Jing Yuan main since day one, and Sparkle really changes everything. She gives him more skill points and action advance. Importantly, she gives him long-lasting buffs outside his current turn, making it so Lightning Lord has buff uptime all the time, making Lightning Lord hit super hard. On top of that, he is just so handsome and cool, and I personally love him, making him a great pull for any account, making it so that your eyes are blessed during your gaming experience. And overall, he is a general pun not intended, quality of life upgrade to your account. Jing Yuan mains rise up. Our general is very strong now. Yay! Qingque, on the other hand, deserves the S tier. Although there is an argument for her to be S+ as well. However, I will take her being at the S tier. It is fine and I respect it. Because she is so RNG reliant. Maybe on a good day, she is B tier. Maybe on a bad day, she is S tier. We will see. I don't know. So, I will leave it at that. Maybe they rolled a random number generator to put her on this list. It does say E6 Qingque, which really does help with her damage. So, I will trust them that they did their research. And I generally agree because I think it's very cool that she gets the recognition she deserves. She's also super strong now that Sparkle's in the game, so I will just trust that they used a random number generator to put Qingque on this list, because you can argue that Qingque benefits the most from Sparkle's release. Seele is also another character that benefits from Sparkle's release, and she is probably an S tier unit now. However, I feel like they didn't want to put that much characters in the S+ tier, so Qingque is in the S tier. That is fine. She is super good with her resurgence procs in proccing multiple times when she kills weaker enemies. Sparkle's buff makes it so that is easier because she has higher crit damage now, and her light cone, if you pulled it, gives you crit rate on your Seele or other characters too, making it so that she is more consistent. She is also quantum and benefits from the additional attack buffs provided by Sparkle's talents. Overall, I love Seele. I think she has so much drip and she deserves S+ tier, although S tier is understandable to keep her friend Qingque company. Moving down to the A tier, where I think it's starting to get out of hand. I think that Argenti is at least S tier, if not maybe S+ tier. He is currently probably the best physical character in the game. He is definitely the best in pure fiction and definitely is good in Memory of Chaos as well. His burst is super satisfying to use and he is such a beautiful character. I feel that justifies him being in a slightly higher tier. Don't quote me on that though. Blade is definitely an S+ tier unit though. His tankiness and the fact that he never dies and is able to go into any content makes him an invaluable unit to have. I think that flexibility and just the ability to almost brute force anything and take so much abuse really lends him a place in either S or maybe even S+ tier. Although I can understand why they put him in A tier, sometimes he uses his HP too much and then maybe can die, so maybe there's that. Also, he generally isn't a good role model, seeing as he wants himself to get hurt all the time. I don't think Hoyoverse necessarily supports masochism, so maybe they nerfed him, and maybe the people of this tier list agree as well, therefore they chose to put him in his low potential, which is A tier. I can respect that. But he's overall a super strong unit that benefits from being hit. Just like Clara, who loves being hit. She is A tier, but I think definitely can go at least S tier or S+ tier as well. She's such a strong unit, probably one of the strongest units in the game because of the fact that she's a free, I say free, but you have to get the 300 pulls. But if you get the 300 pulls on the standard banner, she's free. Or if you lose your 50/50s, you get basically free Clara, right? She's a free unit that does so much damage. Her damage is insane. She benefits from getting hit as well, and she's very frugal. She doesn't wear shoes. I know she says that it's because she doesn't feel comfortable wearing shoes on her feet, but I think generally it's so that she can give more money to donations and give more money to charity. So I think she's a very good and kind and loving girl, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't put her in S or S plus tier for that reason. She also does a lot of damage with her physical damage boost traces, and the fact that she has one of the only abilities, that being her skill, that hits all enemies on the field, making her super good for AoE situations, combined with the fact that Svarog in the ultimate state also hits in an AoE manner. Now moving down to the D tier, we have Herta, Himeko, and Serval. These characters, I don't know why they are here. It almost seems a bit backhanded, almost like just because they're strong in pure fiction, they can't be stronger in this tier list. I think they're definitely at least S tier units, although I can understand why they put them in B. Herta is a character that relies on enemies being below 50% HP, and then when they do reach below 50% HP, she does a follow-up attack. So basically, she benefits from having more enemies on the field, so more enemies being able to be lowered to below 50%, and so she does more twirls, more follow-up attacks. She suffers a bit in scenarios where it is not AoE. However, I feel like her damage output is so high with dropping a hal. Just imagine fighting someone and then they bring out the diamond a size of your car and then smashes it over your head. If you don't die to the impact of that alone, you'll probably die to how hard you're being flexed on. Basically the same story for Himeko, whereas she wants to break enemies' weakness to trigger her follow-up attack, but she basically summons her spaceship to summon a huge laser to strike and take you out. If that is not badass, I don't know what is. She also takes advantage of the OP free-to-play 5-star light cone, a night in the Milky Way, that everyone has on their accounts because we are never lucky. She's overall a very strong unit, and I think S tier at least for her. Serval as well. I know that maybe she's a 4-star and people look down on her, but she's actually very respectable. She applies DOT on a lot of enemies, so she can work well with DOT units. She also works well in a straight hyper carry setup due to the fact that she is so cool and she is in a rock band. People in the rock band generally have a lot of charisma, and charisma is a very important skill to lead a team. And that's what basically hyper carries are. Hyper carries are leaders in a team of support supporting them. I feel like Serval will do really good seeing her performance in the main story quest. I feel like she will unite all the team members and make the team very good. That's why I feel like at least an S tier for her, if not an S plus tier. It just depends how much you rank charisma. I know she will never be in the S++ tier like Dan Heng, Imbibitor Lunae, and Jingliu because they are just built different. However, Serval makes up for it by having W Riz. Okay, moving down to the C tier. This one is a bit understandable but at the same time very absurd because I feel like normal Dan Heng is at least S tier, if not S+ tier. Same with Serval, he will never be S++ tier because that's his evolved form. However, I feel like we should pay respects to the fact that without base Dan Heng, there won't be Imbibitor Lunae in the game. So, without base Dan Heng, there won't be Imbibitor Lunae, therefore base Dan Heng should get the respect he deserves, especially since he does amazing wind damage to single targets. And a lot of endgame content in this game is against single targets. I have seen Dan Heng 0 cycle clears before, meaning he can at least be S tier. Same with Pitch Dark Hook the Great. She's already a leader at such a young age, so I expect her charisma to only level up as she grows older. At the same time, fire is an incredible element because it is so lit. She will be a really good hyper carry unit as well due to being able to communicate with all forms of people. I think she is only less than 10 years old, but she instantly got along with the Trailblazer who is God knows how old. Actually, she's probably like only a few months old or something because Kafka literally just gave birth to us, right? So she got along with the Trailblazer who is literally 1 week old. which is so much harder than getting along with a full-grown adult. Misha is also in C tier, which is definitely very wrong. He definitely is at least S tier. Young ice boys are cursed in this game, and I respect him for still being strong regardless of that. He does amazing AoE damage, and if built well, can zero cycle in MOC, which makes him at least an S tier unit. Finally, we reach the bottom. D tier, Arlan, Physical Trailblazer, and Yanqing. First of all, Arlan is definitely an S tier, if not an S plus tier unit. As a commenter pointed out in my 4-star video, he is super loyal and will never betray anyone. That is a fantastic trait to have from a character because it means they will never run away in battle. He also likes to get hit and therefore generates more energy, making him able to spam ult all the time. He is also lightning, which is Kafka's element, meaning he will be very synergistic with her. Overall, at least S tier. Physical Trailblazer is also at least S tier. He is super strong and does a lot of damage. He probably does more damage than Tingyun, Bronya, Sparkle combined, and they are S tier. So he is at least S tier. Same goes for Yanqing. He is super strong, except he is not. So D tier. Moving on to specialists. Kafka is definitely S++ tier. She enables all the DOT characters. Without her, all the DOT characters are literally unusable because they are so reliant on her. They can't do damage on their own. Obviously, they need Kafka to detonate the dots because enemies will never move if you are well invested in the game. Because if you are really strong and you build your characters well, enemies will die just by you landing your skills. So they'll never get a turn to trigger the DOT themselves. So that's why Kafka is so OP, enabling you to one-shot them before they take their turn. So that is really amazing. I think it's very fair for Black Swan to be S tier, although she can be sort of considered S+ tier at times, depending how often the enemy moves. However, I'll take this. Topaz as well, I feel like when they release more follow-up attack units, she'll be stronger, but for now S tier is good. Maybe she can go into S+ tier, but I think that is quite subjective, and I think S tier is fine. Although objectively, I would put her in S+ tier. And then we have characters like Luka, Sampo, Xueyi in A tier. I think Luka is really good as a dot unit. However, the same thing, he relies on Kafka, so I don't think it really matters where he's put. But considering how strong Kafka is and the fact that she's S++ tier, I think he's at least S tier. Same goes for Sampo. I think it's definitely a solid S tier unit. I would put him in S tier if I made my own tier list, but I'm not claiming to know anything, so this is just my objective opinions on this. But just for discussion's sake, if I did make my own tier list, which I would never dare do because I wouldn't dare have no opinion, I'll put him in a S tier. And for Xueyi, I think she is A tier, being understandable, but with E6, I think she is definitely an S tier unit. She does a lot of follow-up attacks, so she can work with Elation Path, which is OP. She does a big weakness break with her ults. She built so much break effect, and her insane synergy with Ruan Mei is off the charts. So I would definitely put her in S tier, especially with Sparkle's release being really good for her, because if you roll perfectly on the Watchmaker set, the Watchmaker set's 30% break effect is actually a quite significant upgrade for Xueyi in terms of damage. So definitely at least S tier, if not S+ tier as a unit, depending on how much you like robots. I think Guinaifen being in B tier is kind of weird. She is at least S tier because once again, she's carried by Kafka, so she's at least S tier. Welt, on the other hand, makes the enemy slower, which is super good because the less they move, the more you can attack them, and the more you can attack them, the faster you kill them, right? Because that's how speed works. So I think he is S tier at the very least, just out of respect as well for the fact that he is wearing glasses, which is very cool. Only cool people wear glasses. And the fact that he is old and still being able to hang around with these kids is a super hard thing to do, and I really respect him for that. Okay, now this is just straight up weird. Why is Sushang E6 in C tier? I gotta think about this for a while, but yeah, definitely. She's at least an S tier unit. I wasn't sure there for a sec, but yeah, definitely S tier. She does great with weakness break. She's physical, which is the strongest element in the game. Weakness break for physical is the strongest physical, DOT in the game, which is amazing. She has the action forward with her E Alt E combo. And I think she's overall such a great unit for physical weak enemies. And you couldn't say that, okay, maybe against non-physical weak enemies she's bad, but that's the same for kind of Argenti and Clara as well. And there are so many physical weak enemies in the game that I feel like she's at least S tier. If she was great against all types of units, then she would be S plus, if not S plus plus tier. And E6 Trailblazer being at C tier is weird. I think she is at least S tier as a unit, because Fire Trailblazer taunts all enemies and she lands forwards, which is so cool. And also she does mass fire break damage, which is super beneficial against fire weak enemies. She's an offensive support. And also, she makes your team harder to kill by just being tanky on her own and also having a passive that reduces the damage incoming to your team, kind of like Fu Xuan, but she's free and E6, so that's pretty amazing. Definitely at least S tier. So finally we get to the amplifiers, and I think this is very reasonable, although I would say Ruan Mei and Sparkle at least S++ tier, if not S+++ tier. I know I did say earlier that I would understand them not wanting an S++ tier because that is pretty cringe, but not putting them in S++ tier too is pretty cringe. You know, I'm just saying. Ruan Mei obviously is like the Kazuha of this game, if you get that reference. She buffs all your teammates on the team. She just makes life easier. She makes enemies act less after being weakness broken, and she does just such an amazing job of elevating all the relatively weaker units that would maybe be in S tier to like S plus tier. She basically raises a unit by 1 tier just by being on the team. Sparkle as well, action forwards allies and provides so much skill points that skill points never become an issue. She carried Dan Heng up to S plus and Jing Yuan up to S on this tier list, so I think that she definitely deserves her S plus rating. Bronya is S here, although there's definitely an argument for Bronya being S plus. She's such a versatile unit if she uses her basic playstyle or just the basic playstyle, she will be very skill point positive and do so much damage. So she's so versatile. She's basically a free unit as well. I think S plus tier at least, if not S plus tier as well. Silver Wolf being S tier is kind of weird. I think she's at least S plus tier unit. She's so cool. She's a gamer like me, for real. And she gave us fuel when she first came out, just like Sparkle did recently. But remember back then, Silver Wolf did the same thing. So I forever respect her for that. Tingyun being S tier puts a tear on my eye. No pun intended. Actually, pun intended. JK lol XD. She's at least S++ tier as a unit. In fact, she was so strong that they had to nerf her in the story by killing her. She gives energy and she is so strong. She does damage on her own as well. She gives attack percent and she is so cute and cool. I love her. S++ tier at least. Pela is definitely an S tier unit, if not S++ tier unit. She is so cool. I think being smart and reading books and being able to draw and write fanfiction is amazing. I respect those talents. She is so cool and she does mass AoE defense down and she doesn't even need to consume that much skill points. In fact, she was the one carrying Daniel Imbibitor Lunae up to S tier in the previous patches to begin with. Without her, she wouldn't have been even S tier before Sparkle, so put some respect on her name. She deserves the S tier too. I think for Asta and Hanya, it is pretty deserved. I mean, I pretty much understand why they put them in B tier. Although, if I were to think about it, I would say that there's also a reason to put them in at least S tier. Because They both manipulate speed, and we know how important speed is, especially for endgame content like a Memory of Chaos and even pure fiction. You can basically get away with doing less damage if you have more speed, because what you need to clear by is cycles, right? So essentially getting more speed basically extends the fight, which in turn basically gives you more time to do damage. Time is a valuable thing, and Asta and Hanya both provide that. They also provide juicy attack buffs, and alongside all the other Harmony units, they can hold the Light Cone Dance, which further buffs their speed boosting capabilities, making them at least S tier in that regard, because every team would want at least one Harmony unit for the kind of meta we are in now, like DOT teams, hyper carry teams. Some teams even run two. So you can never have too many Harmony units in that sense, especially if you're a new player. So I think S tier, depending on the units you have, would be a very reasonable choice. And finally, for Yukong E6, man, is this slander. She's at least S tier, if not S plus tier. This unit is insane. She gives attack percent to your whole team, crit rate, and crit damage. Wow, that is amazing. And she gives additional imaginary damage boost to your imaginary characters, which is absolutely insane. On top of that, she does so much damage, she may as well be a hunt unit with that ult as well. This is absolute slander. Just because her best friend died doesn't mean you can treat her like this, Hoyo. This is absurd. Okay, finally moving on to sustain units, we have Fu Xuan, which is the only one in S plus tier. I find it hard to understand why, because Fu Xuan never really raises the bar for teams. She's more like a solid foundation. She's not someone that helps you reach heights. She is just such a solid base. So I guess even for that, she deserves S plus tier, because in so many ways you can just put Fu Xuan onto any team, and if she's built decently, the whole team won't have to consider enemy mechanics, won't have to even think about dying. You bring her into any content and you'll survive, right? Maybe apart from like Gold and Gears or like Swarm Disaster in like high difficulties, but like for those stages you just need good buffs and blessings. You don't need Regardless, I think she's an insanely good pull for any account. However, she's not like a character like Huo Hup, which buffs your team's attack by like 40% and gives them energy. She's definitely a more defensive support, although she does have that crit rate buff as well, which is nice. But I think in the end game, characters like Huo Huo is actually very beneficial. So I would say actually Huo Huo would be an S++ tier unit, because she is so cool and she is so strong. Her determination to be a judge, even though she's being haunted by a tale that is a ghost, is so inspiring. And just that little frame and being so brave just puts a smile onto everyone's face, I'm sure. So she's a great model and deserves to be a S++ tier unit. She also heals and cleanses really well, which I really respect. She keeps us safe and healthy. Same goes for Luocha. He's not a stingy man. He doesn't ask for your resources. He's a very frugal and very economical pick. He just does his job. He has a cleanse as well. And he does it without any skill point consumption, which is amazing. He's just there, but he's just like a solid foundation like Fu Xuan, although maybe you do risk dying a bit because your supports need to have a decent amount of HP and defense as well to not get one shot, because he can't help them if they get one shot, whereas Fu Xuan prevents that. So I would agree with Fu Xuan being S+ tier and Luocha being an S tier, although I would say Huo Huo is definitely S++ tier, if not S+++, just because of her bravery and courage, which I feel like we need to see more of in this world today, and it's something I personally very respect, because I do wish I was more brave as well a lot of time. So it's nice seeing a young girl being able to do all that. Lynx, on the other hand, is an A tier unit according to Prydwen, but I would say that she's at least an S+ tier unit. Never mind, actually just S tier unit. I think the other units are still better. She's on the same level as Luocha maybe, or maybe less. You know what, let's put her in S- tier. She is a camping girl, which, you know, I won't judge. I think it's super cool vibes and she's super independent. And I think she likes to keep to herself, but she does her job. She does cleanse, she does heal, and she doesn't need too much skill points. If your team is relatively healthy, she can sustain with her ult by itself. So I think that's respectable. That is cool. Bailu and Japart B tier is a bit weird. Bailu provides a lot of healing and also provides a revive, which can be invaluable in the early game. Japar does such a good job at just providing such a tanky shield to your whole team that you won't even need to consider dying. It's basically like a free version of Fu Xuan to some extent, like you don't even notice the damage you're taking because by the time your shield is almost depleted, he puts up a new one with decent energy recharge. So with that said, I think they're at least S tier units, both of them. Yeah, both of them. And with March and Natasha in the end, I can understand why they're in C tier. You might say that, oh yeah, March freezes a lot of enemies, so they don't move. And when they don't move, they don't hit you, so you don't generate energy. And her shield is only a single target. And Natasha is basically like Lynx, but just slightly worse due to her kit just, yeah, straight up being worse than Lynx's. But even with all of that in mind, I would say that they're at least, at the very, very minimum, with all that considered, S tier units because of just the flexibility they have and the fact that as long as you survive, you survive. You know, it doesn't matter if it's being done by a amazing and brave healer like Huo Hup or a nurse like March. Actually, a doctor like Natasha. Natasha is the doctor. March is the person on the train that just goes everywhere we go. Yeah, that's her job, right? That's her professional job. Anyway, that is the MOC tier list. Before we go, let's just take a quick look at Pure Fiction because I think it's important too. However, I won't give my in-depth thoughts about it because I personally just genuinely don't care as much about this as Memory of Chaos. Memory of Chaos is where I test characters and try out builds and stuff like that, and generally find more enjoyment playing. Pure Fiction, so far it seems to me like just put in Herta and Himeko and clear. I know if I don't use Herta and Himeko, which, you know, I've built up already, I would be able to try more teams and do more fun stuff there if I just handicap myself, but why would I, right? I mean, I love these two characters and it just so happens that they're so good in Pure Fiction. I built them way before Pure Fiction came out, so yeah, I'm not really having problems with Pure Fiction. Herta is basically a free character at high Eidolons as well because we get so many of her for free, and Himeko is also basically a free character. So, I mean, it should be pretty easy. They are both like S tier, S plus tier, although I would argue that they are at least S plus plus tier unit and maybe even treading into the cringe territory of S plus 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 tier. I can't say about Argenti, but all I know is that he is a paid character. You have to use Jade to get him, so won't say too much about that. Sparkle is an S tier in this one. I would say she's at least S plus tier or S plus plus tier, but other than that, yeah, I would say it's a pretty fair list. Although I would put everyone below A. Yeah, everyone below A. I think I would probably move them up to at least S tier. I hope you enjoyed watching. I know I can get a bit maybe emotional in some of these because I genuinely care about the game and I care a lot about my opinions and how they're heard online. So I just want to preface all this by saying I am very objective and I try to keep this as objective as possible, but I might have sounded a bit emotional, and I'm sorry for that if that came across that way. I'm still learning as a content creator. I'm trying to do better. So yeah, please forgive me. I will catch you guys next time. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Twitch stream, link in the description, and subscribe if you want. If you don't want, that's fine. Bye bye.